What do you need to know before you rent in Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you today. So let's get to it. Welcome to the Living in Oakland, California channel. I'm Rich Fleming, your local realtor, and I'm here to teach you everything you need to know about living, working, playing, sleeping, eating. You know the drill about living in Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay. I get a ton of people who reach out to me with questions about how to relocate here, what they need to know before they get here, and I love it. That's why I do these videos. So if you've got questions, you know what to do. Drop me a text, send me an email, give me a call, because when it comes to helping you transition to Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay, I got your back. Now, in today's video, we're going to talk about what it's like to rent in the Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay. So some of the things you need to know, how you need to prepare, places to find homes at. So let's just jump into it now. So the first thing to know about renting in Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay is, like many things in the Bay Area, it is really expensive. So San Francisco, the city of San Francisco, is actually the most expensive market per square foot to rent in the United States. And Oakland, being right across the bay from San Francisco, isn't too far behind the cost of renting in San Francisco. You still are going to get about a 10 to 25% reduction in the expense, but when you're talking the astronomical numbers of San Francisco, it is still expensive in Oakland and many parts of the East Bay by comparison to just about everywhere else in the country. So as an example, in December, the average price of a one-bedroom on the market to rent was $3,600 plus, and that represents about a 13.5% increase over 2020. Now, in Oakland, in December, the typical one-bedroom rent was over $3,100 per month, and that represents, I believe, about an 18+% increase over the previous year. So as you can see, it isn't expensive to rent in Oakland. Now, any numbers I give in here are averages or medians. You can find places that are definitely above these prices, and you can find places below, but it kind of gives you a feel for what you can expect as far as rental prices. So for a two-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, the median price in December of 2021 was about $4,400, and that represented a little bit more than a 3% increase over the year before. Now in Oakland, for that two-bedroom apartment, you can expect to pay a price of about $4,100 to $4,200 on average, and that represents about an 18.5% increase over the previous years. Now, one of the trends you have definitely seen in the Bay Area recently is people moving from San Francisco and moving to the East Bay, specifically Oakland. There has been a lot of apartment development in Oakland, and you can get many of the amenities for a lower price than you can in San Francisco and still have a great quality of life. And that's caused a lot of people to move over to Oakland. So beyond San Francisco and Oakland, let me give you some average prices for apartments in other East Bay cities. And I've got my notes here. Pardon me as I refer to them. It's kind of a little bit of a long list, so I want to just make sure I got everything correct. So in the city of Antioch, the average price is going to be just under $2,000. In Fremont, you're looking at about $2,500. In Hayward, you're looking at about $2,200. In Richmond, you're looking at about $2,500. Vallejo, you're looking at a little bit over $1,900. And in Walnut Creek, you're looking just under $2,500 per month. So that is an idea, and this is for the average apartment. It's not necessarily a one or two bedroom. This particular study kind of meshed them all together. So you might be able to find one bedrooms for under this, and you can definitely find one bedrooms for over this amount in these different cities. What are some of the factors that are really driving the increase in housing prices, especially in the East Bay? Well, one is a local migration, as I discussed a little bit earlier. People are leaving San Francisco to come to the East Bay, or even leaving Silicon Valley to come to the East Bay, because they have more ability to do remote work due to the times of COVID. And thus, they can move to areas that are relatively inexpensive compared to San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and just go into the office 2 or 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. So that's kind of attracted people to the East Bay, which is lower cost. The economy in California is quite strong. The GDP growth here has been higher than the nation overall as an average, and business is good. So, people have jobs, and it's just causing growth in the area. Another factor really driving more people to rent is the dramatic increase in the price of housing. So over the last 18 months or so, since the times of COVID began, the prices of homes in the Bay Area have probably increased at least 20, maybe upwards of 30%, depending on the area. And this has really made the affordability of purchasing much less for a lot of people. This increases the demand for rentals. And that's what we're seeing. Let's talk about rent control, because that is a pretty important factor in a number of East Bay cities. So let's talk about that a little bit. And let me start off by just telling you which cities in the East Bay have some form of rent control. And let me see if I remember them all. There's 6. So there's the city of Alameda, the city of Oakland, Hayward, Emeryville, Richmond, and Berkeley. Now, the form of rent control, each of these cities varies, but they do all have some restrictions on a landlord's ability to either evict you or to raise rents, or some combination thereof. So it is very important to understand the rent control in the various cities. And I'll talk about Oakland's rent control a little bit more. So in California, if a building was built before, I believe it's 1983, it can be subject to rent control. So you will find many of the older apartment buildings in Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley do fall under some form of rent control. In Oakland, what typically is the case is that you will rent the apartment at the current market rate for that apartment. But once you are in the apartment, your rental increases, the rate that they can increase your rent is limited. And you will see typical increases in Oakland from 1 to about maybe 3% at the most. When I rented in Oakland, I don't think I ever got a 3% increase. So it really helps with the predictability of your budget going forward. Now, if you rent in a newer building, especially one of the more modern buildings built after 1983, then there is no rent control. And that means you could be subject to, 18% rent increase if that's what the market is carrying right now. So definitely understand that. Typically, the older buildings don't have all the same amenities. They tend to have larger living spaces, but not necessarily in-unit laundry or building security. They don't necessarily have parking in the building. It can vary. So you're kind of trading off some conveniences for rent predictability. There are a number of buildings, especially in the Uptown, Downtown, and Brooklyn Basin areas of Oakland, that are brand new and come with all of the amenities that people may want. So what are some tips for finding a place and renting a place in Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay? Like buying a house in the rest of the Bay Area, if you find an apartment that you really love and you think is absolutely great, you've got to jump on it now. You don't have time to think about it for a day or a week or 2 weeks. That apartment will be gone. Now, granted, because, especially in Oakland, because there's been so much development for apartments in the last 5 years or so, the market for rentals isn't as intense as it was, 5+ years ago. But it is still very intense. And in certain cities, you have seen a lot more apartment development, especially near transit areas. This is the case in Oakland. This is the case in Walnut Creek. This is the case in Fremont. And that has really started to help the rental market a little bit. But as you can see by the numbers I talked about earlier in this video, it's still pretty intense and still pretty expensive. So things you can do: A, come with your information prepared. If you go and see an apartment, make sure you're ready to submit an application right then and there. You've got to have all your references, be ready to leave a deposit if necessary. Just be ready to go. As I mentioned, you don't have time to think about it or collect your information. Be ready to go right when you start looking. The second thing is really, as I alluded to earlier, decide if you want a rent control apartment or not. That will really impact, your experience of living, budgetary wise and amenity wise. So really narrow that down. And that choice will also kind of influence what neighborhood you end up being in. Third thing is where you should look for apartments. And in the Bay Area, people still use Craigslist a fair amount, but there's some other sources. You can check out Zillow Rents. You can check out apartmentlistings.com, I believe it is. You can check out Rent Cafe. So to rent an apartment in the East Bay, you're going to need 1 month's rent for a deposit and 1 month's rent for the actual rent, the first month's rent. You don't get into situations too often where they ask for first and last month and a deposit. There's some restrictions about doing that, I believe, in California. You have to pardon me. I actually work primarily in buying and selling of real estate. I don't work in the field of property management, rentals. So my expertise is not 100% there, but I believe there are some restrictions in that regard. So the summary of all this, there's opportunities to rent in the East Bay. The market, because of some development of apartment buildings in a number of East Bay cities, has loosened up in recent years. It is still expensive. Be ready to act when you find something. So another strategy you can consider if you don't want to rent is house hacking. And this is very common, especially among people in their 20s and 30s, early 30s. They will get together and purchase a house together to lower the cost of purchasing the house and rent out whatever additional rooms there are in the house to help bring down the mortgage, bring down their payment. And if they are very successful in doing this and planning, they might be able to live essentially rent-free in the house they own. Now, this is a strategy that has become a little bit more difficult because of the increasing prices here in the Bay Area, but it can still be preferable to renting depending on your situation and what your objectives are. If you're considering buying in the Bay Area, well, there are still bidding wars for homes, especially in desirable areas. So if you want some strategies to help you be successful in making offers on homes, check out this video I did recently on some tips on how to win bidding wars. If you have any questions about anything I covered in this video, you know what to do. Drop me a text, send me an email, give me a call, because when it comes to helping you transition to Oakland and the rest of the San Francisco East Bay, I got your back. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up button so YouTube knows to show it to people with interests similar to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and hit that bell notification so you know each and every time I do a new video. And I'll catch you in the next video.